Hi guys, Irina here and welcome back to my channel where I review everything tech. In today's video, let's compare these three iPhones, the new iPhone 13 Pro Max, the last year's iPhone 12 Pro Max, and also the new iPhone 13 because, as I can see from the comments, a lot of you guys are wondering about the difference between the iPhone 13 and 13 Pro Max when it comes to camera performance. So let's begin. As always, I'll break down this video into categories and we'll take a look at some daylight and night photos, as well as portraits, selfies, and so much more. And at the end of this video, I'll test the side-by-side video quality and stabilization. Let's quickly go over the camera specs. All of these phones have 12 megapixel main cameras and 12 megapixel ultra-wide cameras. However, the iPhone 13 is the only phone between these three that doesn't have a telephoto camera. It's important to note that the iPhone 13 and the 13 Pro Max have larger sensors on their main cameras than the 12 Pro Max, which means that these phones should provide brighter and sharper looking photos, especially in low light. But let's see how it all translates to the real-world photos and videos and dive into this camera test. Let's start with the portrait mode. When it comes to taking portraits, the main difference is that the Pro models will let you choose between two zoom options. The first one is zoomed in, with 2.5 times zoom on the 12 Pro Max and 3 times zoom on the 13 Pro Max, while the iPhone 13 cannot zoom in the portrait mode. And another option on the Pro models in the portrait mode is this standard no zoom look, just like on the iPhone 13. So, as expected, we get very similar photos from these iPhones. The only thing is that the photos from the iPhone 13 and the 13 Pro Max look slightly brighter and more vibrant to me. But getting back to these portraits taken with the telephoto cameras on the Pro models, here the situation is quite the opposite, where the 12 Pro Max produces a brighter photo, but as you can see, it's slightly less contrasty and detailed when compared to the 13 Pro Max. Moving on to the next three portraits, and here I want to talk about how good these phones are when it comes to separating the subject from the background. And as you can see, we have some minor flaws in these shots, and in this particular example, the iPhone 13 did a better job. But honestly guys, there is no perfect phone, they all screw up sometimes. Next, let's take a look at some random daylight photos. If you ask me, these photos are super similar to each other in terms of exposure and colors. I've noticed that sometimes the 12 Pro Max produces slightly brighter looking photos than the iPhone 13 and the 13 Pro Max, but in general, all these differences are very subtle. Moving on to the ultra-wide photos. All of these iPhones have a 120-degree field of view on their ultra-wide cameras, so they're equal in terms of how much you could fit into the frame. These ultra-wide photos were taken when the sun was going down, so there wasn't as much light available. And we'll talk about the night ultra-wide photos later in this video, but now let's talk about zoomed photos. A quick reminder for you guys, the iPhone 13 is the only phone between these three that doesn't have a telephoto camera, and the telephoto camera is a huge advantage when it comes to zoomed photos, because an iPhone with a telephoto camera will always provide sharper looking photos. When it comes to maximum zoom for these iPhones, it's 12 times for the 12 Pro Max, 5 times for the iPhone 13, and 15 times for the 13 Pro Max. And a few more zoomed photos for you guys. Now let's switch to the front cameras of these phones. We have 12 megapixel cameras with apertures of 2.2 on all of these iPhones. And let's take a look at some selfies. And while these selfies seem to be equal in terms of how sharp they are, the photo from the 12 Pro Max looks different when it comes to exposure. It appears less bright. And also, my skin in the photos from the 12 Pro Max tends to look slightly warmer than it is in real life. Speaking of selfie videos, as you can see, the stabilization is great on all of these phones, no complaints here. And when it comes to the video quality itself, these videos seem practically identical to me. And here are some selfie videos taken in very low light, and I don't really see any dramatic difference here either. Now let's talk about the photos taken in very low light. All of these phones have the night mode on their main cameras as well as their ultra-wide cameras, and while these photos could be different in terms of exposure and saturation, I would say in most situations they look pretty much equal when it comes to how sharp they are, even despite the fact that the cameras on the new iPhone 13 lineup have larger sensors. The thing I was most curious to test out was the night mode on the telephoto camera of the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and I have to admit that I'm impressed. First of all, there is a lack of noise in the sky. Second, guys, look at this grass. It's so sharp and crisp. And finally, look how sharp this building looks. Wow. And by the way, I like that the overall photo from the 13 Pro Max appears darker because this is the closest to what I saw with my own eyes. Next, let's talk about videos, and let's start with a stabilization test. These videos were shot handheld, and as you can see, I was walking pretty fast. Despite all of that, the stabilization is amazing on all of these phones. All of these iPhones have the sensor shift optical image stabilization. Let me know, guys, if you can see a difference. A few daylight videos for you guys, and you can judge them for yourself. and a few night videos for you guys. That's all for this video, guys. Let me know what you think about the camera performance of these iPhones. I hope this camera comparison will help you decide which phone to get. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.